The sun was mercilessly burning on the back of our necks as we moved through the dense jungle. The heat was suffocating and the humidity unbearable. Each step was a titanic effort, and the undergrowth seemed to swallow us with its green jaws. We were an elite battalion, hardened in 1,000 battles, but nothing had prepared us for the hell that awaited us in the depths of the Amazon jungle. Our mission was simple: to locate and rescue a group of scientists who had disappeared in the region. But soon we realized we had underestimated the danger. Rumors of a tribal war circulated among the locals, but no one had warned us of the magnitude of the conflict. The two tribes, the Yanomamis and the Kayapos, were engaged in a relentless struggle for control of the territory. It was not just a war over land, it was a war for survival, and we unknowingly had been caught in the middle. The first signs of war came in the form of guttural cries echoing in the night. Then we found the mutilated bodies of some poachers, and finally we came across the completely devastated Yanomami village. The Kayapos had attacked without mercy, massacring men, women, and children. Horror took hold of us. I had never seen so much death and destruction, and we knew it was only the beginning. The following days were hell. We advanced cautiously, rifle in hand, expecting an attack at any moment. The tension was palpable and fear hung in the air. And then it happened. One morning, while resting in a clearing, we were surprised by a rain of arrows. The Kayapos attacked us with ferocity, using all the weapons at their disposal: spears, arrows, machetes. The battle was brutal, bloody, and relentless. Comrades fell beside me, their bodies riddled with arrows. I myself took an arrow to the arm, but the adrenaline kept me from feeling the pain. We fought like cornered beasts with the sole idea of surviving. In the end, thanks to our superior weaponry and training, we managed to repel the attack. But the victory was bittersweet. We had survived, yes, but at what cost? Many of my comrades had died, and those of us who remained were physically and psychologically wounded. And the worst of all, it was only the beginning. We still had a long way to go, and we knew the Kayapos would not give up easily. The War of the Tribes had just begun. The following days were a nightmare. We moved through the jungle like ghosts, stalked by death at every corner. The Kayapos attacked us relentlessly, using their cunning and knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. Every step was a risk, every breath an agony. Food was scarce, water was rotting, diseases began to take their toll, and little by little, hope began to fade. Many of my comrades started to lose their minds. Some deserted, others committed suicide. I myself was on the brink of the abyss. The horror of war, the loss of my friends, the uncertainty of the future. It was too much to bear. One day, while wandering disoriented through the jungle, I met an elderly Yanomami. He was the sole survivor of the massacre of his village. He spoke to me of the war, of the atrocities committed by both sides, of the pain and suffering he had witnessed. And he also spoke to me of the prophecy, an ancient legend that spoke of the end of the war. According to the prophecy, only a warrior with a pure heart would be able to unite the tribes and bring peace to the region. I don't know if I believed it at the time, but his words echoed in my head for days. A warrior with a pure heart. Was it me? Was there anything pure left in my heart after all I had seen and done? However, the prophecy became a glimmer of hope in the midst of darkness. We had to find the missing scientists. But now I also had another goal: to find a way to stop the war. With the help of the Yanomami elder, I learned more about the customs and beliefs of the tribes. He told me about their rituals, their gods, their fears, and little by little I began to understand the roots of the conflict. The war was not just for territory, but also for resources that were becoming increasingly scarce due to deforestation and the expansion of civilization. One day, while crossing a mosquito-infested swamp, we came across a Kayapo camp. They were young warriors with bodies painted for war and fierce looks in their eyes. We prepared for combat, but then I remembered the elder's words. Instead of shooting, I stepped forward and dropped my weapon. The Kayapos were stunned, suspicious. With the elder acting as an interpreter, I spoke to them about the destruction, the pain, and the prophecy. I told them the story of the massacre of the Yanomami village and the sadness it caused me. To my surprise, some Kayapo warriors bowed their heads in shame. One of them, a young man with a scar across his cheek, stepped forward. He spoke of the loss of his brother at the hands of the Yanomamis and the hatred that consumed his heart. The conversation was long and tense, but gradually an understanding began to take shape. In the end, we reached an agreement. A temporary ceasefire to allow us to find the scientists, and then a meeting between the leaders of both tribes to negotiate peace. It wasn't easy to convince my comrades to trust the Kayapos, but in the end, desperation and the hope of finding the scientists alive outweighed everything else. The search continued, but now with a difference. We were escorted by Kayapo warriors. Days later, we arrived at an abandoned camp. The signs indicated that the scientists had been there but had been captured. We followed the trail that led us to a remote area of the jungle, a sacred place for the Kayapos. There, in a clearing surrounded by giant trees, we found the scientists. They were alive but weakened and frightened. They had been captured by the Kayapos, not as hostages but as guests. The Kayapos believed that the scientists were shamans sent by their gods to help them resolve the conflict. The surprise was huge. The scientists, of course, had no magical powers, but had knowledge that could be useful to both tribes. We took advantage of the situation to bring the leaders of the tribes together. The meeting was tense, filled with resentment and distrust. But with the help of the scientists, who acted as mediators, and thanks to the seed of peace we had planted in the previous encounter, we managed to lay the foundations for an agreement. The scientists explained the importance of environmental conservation and the sustainable exploitation of resources. They promised to help both tribes adapt to the new times and find solutions to the problems that plagued them. The negotiations lasted days, but finally, a peace treaty was signed. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a beginning. The wounds of war would take time to heal, but at least the bloodshed had stopped. We, the soldiers, became observers, guarantors of the agreement. And I, the soldier who would never consider himself a man of pure heart, became a kind of symbol of hope. The story of how a soldier, thanks to the help of an indigenous elder and a prophecy, managed to stop a tribal war spread through the jungle. I don't know if the story was true or not, but it served for something, to plant the seed of peace. And that, in the midst of the horror we had witnessed, was the only thing we had left. Weeks passed until we finally managed to leave the jungle. We were emaciated, sick, with our souls in tatters, but we also emerged alive, with an incredible story to tell and an indelible lesson. The civil war had not been completely eradicated, but hostilities had ceased. The tribes worked with the scientists to find a way of sustainable coexistence. And I, upon returning to civilization, was not the same man who had entered the jungle. The experience had transformed me. The nightmares tormented me at night, but I also carried with me a strange sense of hope. I had seen the abyss of barbarism, but I'd also witnessed a glimmer of humanity in the midst of conflict. And that was something I would never forget. My return to normal life was difficult. The city seemed noisy, chaotic, superficial to me. My comrades treated me with a mixture of respect and morbid curiosity. The media sought me out to tell the story, but I didn't want to be a hero. I was just a soldier who had survived hell and learned a hard lesson. War is not always the answer. Years later, I dedicate myself to giving talks in schools and universities. I speak to young people about the dangers of war, the importance of peace, respect for nature, and indigenous cultures. I don't know if my words achieve anything, but at least I try. I try to convey the hope I found in the middle of the jungle. The hope that human beings can overcome our differences and build a better world. Because in the end, the story of the War of the Tribes is not just a story of horror. It is also a story of humanity, of redemption, of the struggle for peace, even in the heart of the deepest darkness. Sweat soaked my uniform in the Peruvian jungle. It was a constant torture, and the humidity clung to my skin like a second layer. Each step was a titanic effort, and the undergrowth seemed to swallow us with its green jaws. We were an elite battalion, hardened in 1,000 battles, but nothing had prepared us for the hell that awaited us in the depths of the Amazon. Our mission was simple: locate and destroy a guerrilla base operating in the region. But soon we realized we had underestimated the enemy. The guerrillas were relentless, using brutal and ruthless tactics. Ambushes, sabotage, landmines, anything was valid to eliminate government forces. And the worst of all was that they seemed to be everywhere. They moved like shadows through the jungle, camouflaged among the vegetation, invisible to our eyes. The guerrilla war became a deadly game of cat and mouse, a game where death was the only reward. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. The tension was constant, fear an inseparable companion. Paranoia took hold of us, and each soldier began to see enemies in the shadows. The first to fall were the youngest, the most inexperienced. A hidden sniper would take their life with a single shot, not giving them time to react. Then the veterans, those who had survived the cruelest wars, began to die. The guerrillas laid deadly traps, using their knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. Each death was a wound to the soul, an irreparable loss, and impotence was the worst torture. I myself was saved by a miracle on several occasions. A bullet grazed my head, another pierced my bulletproof vest. Death danced around me, mocking me. I began to lose count of the days, nights, and missions. The jungle became a maze with no way out, a nightmare from which it was impossible to escape. One day, while advancing along a narrow path, we were surprised by a rain of fire. The guerrillas attacked us from the heights, using grenade launchers and assault rifles. The battle was brutal, bloody, and relentless. Soldiers fell around me like flies, their bodies riddled with bullets. I myself received a wound in my leg, but adrenaline kept me from feeling the pain. I fought like a cornered animal with the sole idea of surviving. In the end, thanks to our superior firepower, we managed to repel the attack. But the victory was bittersweet. We had survived, yes, but at what cost? Many of my comrades had died, and those of us who remained were physically and psychologically wounded. And the worst of all, it was only the beginning. The guerrilla war was not a conventional war. There were no battlefronts, no rules, no mercy. It was a dirty war, a war without end. And we soldiers were just pieces of meat on a macabre chessboard. The following months were hell. The guerrillas had infiltrated the local population, making it impossible to distinguish between friends and enemies. Every village, every house, every person was a potential danger. Paranoia consumed us, and distrust became our only ally. Search and destroy operations became suicide missions. The guerrillas attacked us by surprise and then vanished into the jungle like ghosts. Death became something commonplace. We saw it in the eyes of our comrades, in the faces of civilians, in nature itself. The guerrilla war was dehumanizing us, turning us into soulless killing machines. One day, while returning from a failed operation, we found a burned village. The guerrillas had massacred all the inhabitants, men, women, and children. The scene was Dantean, a picture of horror that I will never forget. The charred bodies, the faces contorted in pain, the dry blood staining the ground. The stench of burned flesh clung to our clothes, our lungs, our souls. At that moment, something broke inside me. Rage, impotence, despair, fused into an explosive cocktail. I lost control. I screamed, cursed, cried. I felt sanity slipping through the cracks of my helmet. My comrades watched me with a mixture of pity and fear. They knew I was the next to lose my mind, the next to succumb to the madness that guerrilla war instilled in our minds. But that emotional outburst cleansed me, or so I thought. I returned to the battle with a new objective: to avenge the innocent victims, to eradicate the guerrillas from the face of the earth. My determination was a flame that burned fiercely, but it was also a double-edged sword. The following days were a spiral of violence. We became obsessed hunters, tracking the guerrillas with an insatiable thirst for blood. We executed suspects without prior trial, razed entire villages in search of information. The lines between good and evil blurred completely, and the most terrifying thing was that the guerrillas seemed to feed on our cruelty. Their attacks became bolder, more sadistic. They began to leave macabre messages on the bodies of our comrades, using psychological warfare tactics that sunk us even deeper into the abyss of madness. One night, while guarding an outpost, we were attacked by a large group of guerrillas. The battle was fierce. Tracer bullets drew lines of fire in the dark. The cries of the wounded mingled with the explosions of grenades. Amid the chaos, I lost contact with my unit. Alone, disoriented, I wandered through the jungle for days, with the enemy stalking me in every shadow. Hunger, thirst, exhaustion were consuming me. Hallucinations took hold of me. I saw deformed faces in the undergrowth, heard voices calling my name. I was on the verge of collapse, about to become another victim of the jungle. But then I found it. A small wooden cabin, almost camouflaged by the vegetation. With a last bit of strength, I dragged myself towards it, hoping to find refuge. When I opened the door, an indigenous elder looked at me in surprise. He didn't speak Spanish, but his gestures indicated that I should stay quiet. For days he hid me from the guerrillas, feeding me with roots and wild fruits. Though we couldn't communicate with words, he conveyed a sense of peace and humanity that I had long forgotten. In his eyes I saw sadness for the war, but also a firm determination to survive. When I regained enough strength to leave, the elder gave me a wooden amulet, a good luck charm. I don't know if it worked or if it was mere coincidence, but I managed to find a reconnaissance patrol. My return to the camp was met with disbelief. They had given me up for dead. I was a broken man, a specter of the soldier who had entered the jungle. The war had ended, at least for us, but the victory tasted like ashes. We had managed to expel the guerrilla from the area, but at an incalculable price. Many of my comrades had died, and those of us who remained were marked forever. The nightmares torment me at night. I see again the faces of my fallen comrades, the spilled blood, the destroyed innocence. The amulet of the indigenous elder rests on my bedside table, a reminder of the peace we lost and the humanity we almost forgot in the heart of the jungle. The guerrilla war was fought not only on the battlefield, but also in our minds and hearts. And it is that battle that I still fight, not knowing when or if I will ever find true peace. Our mission: locate and destroy a drug trafficker camp operating in the region. But soon we realized we had underestimated the danger. The narcos were ruthless, using brutal and merciless tactics. Ambushes, snipers, landmine, anything was valid to eliminate government forces. And worst of all, we weren't just facing them. There was something else in the jungle, something that stalked us from the shadows, something that watched us with hungry eyes. The first to fall were the youngest, the most inexperienced. A terrifying roar paralyzed them, followed by a deadly silence. We never found their bodies. Then the veterans, those who had survived the cruelest wars, began to die. Their bodies appeared mutilated, with strange marks on their skin. Paranoia took hold of us. Each soldier began to see monsters in the shadows, to hear howls in the night. I myself was saved by a miracle on several occasions. A shadow grazed my head. A roar left me deaf for an instant. The beast was stalking me, playing with me like a cat with a mouse. I began to lose count of the days, nights, and missions. The jungle became a maze with no way out, a nightmare from which it was impossible to escape. One day, while advancing along a narrow path, we were attacked by a rain of bullets. The narcos attacked us from the heights, using assault rifles and grenades. The battle was brutal, bloody, and relentless. Soldiers fell around me like flies, their bodies riddled with bullets. I myself received a wound in my arm, but adrenaline kept me from feeling the pain. I fought like a cornered animal, with the sole idea of surviving. In the end, thanks to our superior firepower, we managed to repel the attack. But the victory was bittersweet. We had survived, yes, but at what cost? Many of my comrades had died, and those of us who remained were physically and psychologically wounded. And the worst of all, it was only the beginning. The beast would not give up. It would continue stalking us, hunting us until none of us were left. The following months were hell. Paranoia consumed us, and distrust became our only ally. Every village, every house, every person was a potential danger. Death became something commonplace. We saw it in the eyes of our comrades, in the faces of civilians, in nature itself. The beast was a constant presence in our lives. Its roars echoed in the night, its tracks marked the ground. One day, while returning from a failed operation, we found a group of mutilated indigenous people. Their bodies were torn apart, their clothes stained with blood. The scene was Danteon, a picture of horror that I will never forget. At that moment, something broke inside me. Rage, impotence, despair, fused into an explosive cocktail. I lost control. I screamed, cursed, cried. I felt sanity slipping through the cracks of my helmet. My comrades watched me with a mixture of pity and fear. They knew I was the next to lose my mind, the next to succumb to the terror that the beast instilled in our souls. But that emotional outburst cleansed me. Or so I thought. I returned to the battle with a new objective, to avenge the innocent victims, to eradicate the beast from the face of the earth. My determination was a flame that burned fiercely, but it was also a double-edged sword. The following days were a spiral of violence. We became obsessed hunters, tracking the beast with an insatiable thirst for blood. We executed suspects without prior trial, razed entire villages in search of information. The lines between good and evil blurred completely, and the beast, as if feeding on our chaos, became more active, more audacious. Its attacks became unpredictable, deadly. It stopped playing with us and began to hunt with terrifying efficiency. One night, while guarding an improvised camp, the ground shook with a deafening roar. The beast emerged from the undergrowth, a grotesque creature that defied all logic. It was enormous, with colossal muscles and black skin like the night. Its sharp fangs dripped saliva, and its yellow eyes shone with inhuman ferocity. Terror paralyzed us. Bullets bounced off its thick skin without causing harm. In the blink of an eye, the beast tore one of my comrades apart, his screams drowned by the crunch of bones. The carnage lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. When the beast retreated with its macabre prey, only the survivors remained, trembling on the ground, stained with blood and with their sanity shattered. From that moment on, hunting the narcos became secondary. Our only mission was to survive the beast. We abandoned conventional military tactics and resorted to desperate measures. We set deadly traps, placed homemade explosives, even consulted a local shaman who provided us with hallucinogenic brews supposedly capable of driving away the creature. Nothing worked. The beast always found a way to outsmart us, eliminating us one by one. Isolation, constant fear, omnipresent death were driving us mad. Hallucinations took hold of us, nightmares became reality. We began to distrust each other, to see enemies in our own comrades. The jungle became a living purgatory, and the beast was our personal demon. One day, only 3 of us were left. Physical and mental exhaustion was such that we could barely hold our rifles. We knew the beast would find us. It was only a matter of time. In a last show of desperation, we decided to set a trap. We dug a huge pit in the center of a clearing and covered it with branches and leaves. Then we positioned ourselves strategically, waiting for our enemy to arrive. Night fell like a black shroud, laden with an ominous silence. Then we heard it, the deafening roar that announced the beast's arrival. It approached stealthily, unhurried, like a predator savoring its prey. We jumped from our hiding places and opened fire. Tracer bullets drew lines of fire in the dark, but the beast dodged them with surprising agility. It pounced on one of my comrades and with colossal strength threw him into the covered pit. My comrade's screams quickly faded, drowned by the earth. Panic seized me. I fired wildly, tears mixing with the sweat and dirt on my face. Suddenly the beast stopped as if something had caught its attention. It turned its grotesque head towards the pit and let out a high-pitched, almost human scream. Then from the darkness of the hole another creature emerged. It was smaller than the beast, but with the same grotesque form and the same black skin. They roared at each other, facing off in a deadly duel. I took advantage of the confusion to escape. I didn't look back. I ran like a madman through the jungle, not caring about the direction, just getting away from that cursed place. I don't know if my comrades survived, or if the beast eliminated its rival. I also don't know if I was the only survivor of that doomed battalion. What I do know is that I will never be able to forget the unknown beast, the creature that stalks in the depths of the jungle, the monster that stripped us of our humanity and left us at the mercy of madness and terror. I managed to escape the jungle, but the jungle never left me. The scars on my body, both physical and mental, are a constant reminder of the hell I lived through. The nightmares visit me every night, transporting me back to the damp darkness, to the deafening roar of the beast, and to the screams of my comrades. They discharged me from the army with honors, but there is no honor in surviving when so many have perished. Guilt eats away at me. Could I have done more? Did I make the right decisions? The questions torment me with no answers in sight. I tried to return to civilian life, but the transition was brutal. The city's noise terrified me, and people seemed alien to my reality. I took refuge in alcohol, seeking to drown the demons that pursued me. One day, hitting rock bottom in a dirty bar, I met an old local hunter who had ventured into the jungle in search of gold and returned empty-handed with a chilling story. His tale was similar to mine, though he spoke of a cursed tribe that worshipped a demonic beast. His story sparked something inside me. I couldn't live with the fear. I couldn't let the beast win. I had to know what it was, where it came from, and if there were more like it lurking in the shadows. So I sold everything I had, bought supplies and equipment, and headed back to the jungle. Not as a soldier, but as a hunter. This time I would not be searching for narcos, but for the beast. The road back was difficult. The jungle, once familiar, now seemed hostile, full of ghosts and painful memories. But I pressed on, driven by a fierce determination. Using my military knowledge and the hunter's clues, I tracked the cursed tribe. I found their abandoned village, evidence of a fierce struggle. I don't know if the beast killed them or if they killed it, but the area emanated a dark energy. Then, following a trail of blood and bones, I ventured into the deepest part of the jungle, an unexplored territory full of hidden dangers. Days and nights passed with no trace of the beast. Hunger, thirst, and loneliness conspired to break my will. But just when I was about to give up, I heard it. It wasn't the deafening roar I remembered, but a lower sound, like a plaintive whimper. I followed it cautiously until I reached a clearing where sunlight barely penetrated. There was the beast, but it was not the invincible creature that had terrified me. It was wounded, bleeding, its enormous body defeated by something unknown. A chill ran down my spine. I don't know if it was pity for the wounded creature or terror at what had defeated it. At that moment, a crack made me turn my head. In the branches of a giant tree, another even more terrifying creature watched the scene. It was smaller than the wounded beast, but its eyes shone with a malignant intelligence. It was the real enemy, the predator for which the cursed tribe had been sacrificed, the creature that had turned the other beast into nothing more than a terrified puppet. I understood then that the jungle harbored more secrets than we ever imagined, secrets that could unleash chaos and destruction. I knew I couldn't face this new threat alone, but I also couldn't stand by and do nothing. So I escaped from the jungle again, this time with an even graver mission: to tell the world what I had seen, to warn them of the dangers hidden in the depths of the Amazon. I know they will call me crazy, that no one will believe me, but I don't care. I have seen horror with my own eyes, and I will not rest until someone listens to me. The jungle has already taken its toll, but it hasn't broken me. I will not let the beast or any other threat lurking in the darkness win the battle. My fight, my new war, has just begun. In the depths of the Amazon, our mission was locate and destroy a guerrilla base operating in the region. But soon we realized we had underestimated the enemy. The guerrillas were relentless, using brutal and ruthless tactics. Ambushes, sabotage, landmines. Anything was valid to eliminate government forces. And worst of all, we weren't just facing them. Paranoia took hold of us. Each soldier began to see monsters in the shadows, to hear wails in the night. I myself was saved by a miracle on several occasions. The sound seemed to come from all directions, confusing and disorienting me. The last time I found myself on the brink of a precipice, fascinated by the call. I clung to the earth with the last of my strength, and terror gave me the power to pull away. I began to lose count of the days, nights, and missions. The jungle became a maze with no way out, a nightmare from which it was impossible to escape. One day, while advancing along a narrow path, we were attacked by a rain of bullets. The guerrillas attacked us from the heights, using assault rifles and grenades. The battle was brutal, bloody, and relentless. Soldiers fell around me like flies, their bodies riddled with bullets. I myself received a wound in my leg, but adrenaline kept me from feeling the pain. I fought like a cornered animal with the sole idea of surviving. In the end, thanks to our superior firepower, we managed to repel the attack. But the victory was bittersweet. We had survived, yes, but at what cost? Many of my comrades had died, and those of us who remained were physically and psychologically wounded. And the worst of all, it was only the beginning. The call would not give up. It would continue attracting us, hunting us until none of us were left. The following months were hell. Paranoia consumed us, and distrust became our only ally. Every village, every house, every person was a potential danger. Death became something commonplace. We saw it in the eyes of our comrades, in the faces of civilians, in nature itself. The call was a constant presence in our lives. Its sound echoed in the night, its echoes reflected in the treetops. One day, while returning from a failed operation, we found a group of mutilated indigenous people. Their bodies were torn apart, their clothes stained with blood. The scene was Danteon, a picture of horror that I will never forget. At that moment, something broke inside me. Rage, impotence, despair, fused into an explosive cocktail. I lost control. I screamed, cursed, cried. I felt sanity slipping through the cracks of my helmet. My comrades watched me with a mixture of pity and fear. They knew I was the next to lose my mind, the next to succumb to the terror that the call instilled in our souls. But that emotional outburst cleansed me. Or so I thought. I returned to the battle with a new objective: to avenge the innocent victims, to eradicate the call from the face of the earth. My determination was a flame that burned fiercely, but it was also a double-edged sword. The following days were a spiral of violence. We became obsessed hunters, tracking the source of the call with an insatiable thirst for blood. We interrogated the few remaining indigenous people, paying with scarce provisions for fragmented information. The legends they told us spoke of a malevolent entity inhabiting the depths of the jungle, a being that lured the unwary with its deadly song. Its name varied among the tribes, but the terror it inspired was universal. Determined to break the cycle, we followed a trail of clues, devoured animal carcasses, giant footprints that did not match any known creature, and the smell of decay that permeated the air as we ventured into forbidden territory. Then we heard it. It was not a guttural lament like before, but a melodic, almost hypnotic song. Its beauty was unsettling, like a carnivorous flower attracting a fly with its sweet scent. I felt an irresistible attraction to the source, but I gripped my rifle tightly to resist. I saw several of my comrades stagger, their eyes glazed over as if they were about to succumb to the call. I fired into the air, the noise breaking the spell. My comrades looked at me with a mixture of gratitude and anger. We knew the entity was close. We continued cautiously, our senses on high alert. The jungle became denser, the sunlight barely penetrating the tangled vegetation. The air grew heavy, charged with palpable electricity. And then we saw it. It was not a beast with fangs and claws as I had expected, but a column of light rising from a clearing in the jungle. The light was multicolored, as beautiful as it was lethal. My comrades, unable to resist any longer, charged toward the light like insects drawn to a flame. My shouts did not reach them. They were engulfed by the very song. An instant later, the light intensified, blinding me momentarily. When I could see again, my comrades had vanished. Only an eerie silence remained, broken only by the buzzing of insects. Terror paralyzed me. I was alone, at the mercy of an entity that had just devoured my comrades without a trace. I backed away slowly, but fear kept me from running. Suddenly, a searing heat hit my back. I turned and saw that the column of light had expanded, approaching me at alarming speed. I knew I couldn't escape. I closed my eyes tightly, expecting death, but it didn't come. When I opened my eyes, the light was gone. I was on my knees in the clearing, trembling like a leaf. I didn't know how much time had passed or how I had survived. I looked around, searching for any sign of my comrades, but there was nothing, only the disturbing stillness of the jungle. At that moment, I knew I was the sole survivor. Guilt and pain overwhelmed me. Why me? What had I done to deserve to live? But survival is a primary instinct. I got up with difficulty, my body aching from the trek and the terror. I had to get out of there. I had to return to the base and report what had happened. The journey back was hell. Every rustle in the underbrush, every bird's flap made me jump. The call of death was no longer a beautiful song, but a constant reminder of the horror I had witnessed. Days later, disoriented and exhausted, I emerged from the jungle. When a soldier saw me, he didn't recognize me. I had become a specter, a man marked by death. I told my story to the lieutenant, but my words sounded delirious. A soldier disappearing for days and then reappearing, speaking of malevolent entities, was not the best way to earn belief. They sent me home with honors, but with doubts. The mission had failed, and I was the only survivor returning with an unbelievable story. I have tried to move on, but the jungle and the call haunt my dreams. The physical scars have healed, but the mental ones remain open. I know no one will believe me, but what I saw in the jungle is real. The call of death stalks the unwary, and I was the only one fortunate or unfortunate enough to escape. Now I live tormented by the question, why did I survive? Am I the only one who resisted the call, or is there something more at play? Perhaps the entity has plans for me, a macabre role I do not yet know. I cannot afford to ignore it. I am meeting with experts in Amazonian folklore and mythology, seeking information about the entity and any weaknesses it may have. I have contacted other soldiers who have served in the region, searching for whispers, rumors of mysterious disappearances or unexplained phenomena. My quest may take me back to the jungle, to the place that terrifies and obsesses me in equal measure. But I have no choice. I must unravel the mystery of the call of death, not just to save myself, but to prevent it from claiming more innocent lives. I know I will fight this battle alone, but I will not give up. I am the last witness, the sole survivor, and the jungle has not finished with me yet.